Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And we have with us a very special guest, Professor Dr. Kimoni Ajani, if I'm saying that correctly. And we're going to tap a little bit into his life, his recent texts, and a little bit, probably a lot of bit, about Haiti, African Revolution, and what does that look like in 2024 nominal terms. So I'm very glad to have this brother here, and I know that you're going to enjoy him too. So all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. Want to welcome each and every one of you to the Mbongi, and make sure that you, in fact, hit the like button and that you share the conversation with friends and family. And make sure that you subscribe if you have not subscribed to the channel. And so, before we bring on our guests, I just have a couple of announcements. So, first and foremost, coming up soon is going to be an important live debate on our good brother Garfield Reed's podcast channel. And it is going to be asking the question: is Sumerian, that means the Sumerian language, a Bantu language? And I will be engaged in conversation with brother out of Italy by the name of Gabriel Bada, who is a philologist and teaches Sumerian. So he's going to be of the opposing position, arguing that Sumerian is not a Bantu language. So that's going to be on Sunday, March the 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So he'll be, I think he is actually in Italy. So it'll be later for those of you on Italy's time. And then, of course, those of you in the US, just adjust your time according to your time zone. And again, that's going to be 2 p.m. New York, Philly time um, on Sunday, March the 17th, which is coming up real soon. And this debate will be simulcast on this channel here. So you can, the main channel is going to be Brother Garfield Reed's channel, but the backup is going to be on this channel. So if you don't know, but you don't this channel, you can still watch and engage in the debate, um, via my channel. So secondly, make sure that you get the book by Dr. Chilimamlima Mukinge titled Muntu Wan Zombie, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation, available now on the maduandelapress.com website as well as Amazon. And of course, my latest text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, Towards a Meaning of the Place Named Kemet, also at maduandelapress.com, or you can go to Amazon.com as well to get the text. So some of what I'll be debating is discussed in this text. So y'all can get a heads up by getting the book, or if you already have the book, reading the book, especially the Appendix B, and get some insights into what's going on in terms of this particular argument. And so Without further ado, I am going to uh, bring up our special guest. But before I do, I just want to introduce him proper like. So, Dr. Kimoni, Ya Ajani, originally hails from a small Ayitian, if I'm saying that correctly, aka Haitian community in Spring Valley, I should say, New York, and is the first generation of Ayitian descent born and still living in the United States. Dr. Ajani graduated from SUNY Oswego, if I'm saying that correctly, in the spring of 2014 with a BA in history and a minor in African American studies. He would go on to receive his MA in African Studies at the University at Albany, SUNY, in 2016. And in 2021, he received his PhD from the Department of Africology and African American Studies at Temple University. His dissertation was titled An Afrocentric Reexamination of the Historiography Around the African Revolution of Ayiti, aka Haiti. Currently, he is a tenure track assistant professor in the Africana Studies Department at Stockton University and serves on the executive council board of the Diopian Institute for Scholarly Advancement and is a member of the grassroots organization Afrocentricity International Philadelphia chapter. And so, without further ado, I welcome to Mbongi Dr. Ya Ajani. Peace and blessings.
Peace, brother. Sakafet to all my Icelands, Hotep, and a BB4 Hodie to all my fellow Black people. It's truly an honor to be on this platform with you, brother. So,
The honor is all mine. The honor is all mine. And just a little bit of background. I first met him, and he has given me the date. I didn't know the exact date, but my first time meeting him was in 2016 at the Sheikh Anta Diop conference that is held here in Philadelphia each year. Yeah, which is a very important conference in which a number of Africologists meet and share the latest in research, plans, and issues facing the world African community. And so, then he was a young, he's still a young, budding intellectual, full of energy and spirit, and very open and welcoming, and wanted to network and make itself known. And I've seen him grow into working on his PhD, attending the conferences, and engaging in some very deep intellectual and revolutionary conversations. And so when I saw that he had a text out, I wanted to make sure that um, I gave his work a voice, and I want to introduce it to you and him to you. You meaning the Mbongi audience and the world community, and not to say that the timing is right, but it's just all in divine order given the situations that's going on in Haiti right now. So the planets align, the Orishas have opened the way, and I just want to thank you once again for coming here and sharing your wisdom with us. And so before we get started, I just want to, since you are new to the program, can you give us just a little bit of background? I know I read a little bit in terms of where you're from, but give us a little bit of background, and more so, leading up to how did you get into what the layperson would call that black stuff, that Africana study, that revolutionary research, and the like. Go ahead.
I have to start with my family. My story is a little painful, but I have to talk about it. My family comes from a small town known as Latibonit. For those who are not familiar with Latibonit, this actually used to be the capital of Ayiti. This is actually where Papa Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Empress Félicité, where they established the capital and where they lived. So this is where my family comes from, the Saint-Hilaire clan, the Saint-Hilaire family. In fact, my mother was the youngest daughter out of 10 kids. And sadly, she died when I was only 2. My father, Jean Francois, wasn't in my life. He ended up getting killed. He was definitely running in those streets. So I don't know the exact circumstances, but I was raised by the matriarch of our family, which was my aunt Annalie Chlorine Philemon Saint-Hilaire. She was the oldest daughter, and in fact, when my grandmother died in Ayiti, she was responsible with, along with her older brother Pierre, with taking care of everybody. So she actually raised my mother, and then when I lost my mother, she raised me and my sister, along with my two cousins. But I call them my brothers. I call my mother Annalie, and I call, in fact, my uncle, who's actually my father. He was actually African American. I know the term now is Black American. He fought in Vietnam. His name was Donald A. Cordon. But one of the reasons why I got into this Black stuff was because I grew up in a household, not only a Haitian household, although my church was mostly a predominantly Haitian church, or Haitian, as we say. I also got a taste of the African American culture. You know, certain films that I wasn't supposed to be watching, but certain films that he had me watch, especially when we saw, of course, Spike Lee's Malcolm X, and you know, they really taught me the importance of embracing who I was as a Black person, or rather an African person. And I really have to start with that foundation because I would not be there. I would not be in the place I am today without them. They made a lot of sacrifices, as well as a lot of people from my community in New York, as well as where my cousins are in Brooklyn, New York, East Flatbush. And without my family and a lot of my elders, I wouldn't be where I'm at. That's the ancestral truth. Sadly, I lost both sets of my parents, so they're with their ancestors now. But part of the reasons why I was pushed to, complete this work was to honor them. In fact, when I was writing my dissertation, sadly, I had lost my father back in 2017, and then my mother passed away my first year teaching at Stockton. She was very sick. She was dealing with dementia, and that's also sort of why I, resonated with Malcolm X autobiography. So I think I gained a deeper understanding of some of the traumas he was undergoing, with the death of his parents, and this also explains my drive to do this work. So those are my foundations. In fact, I always like to begin by stating that despite my title, I don't know anything. I had one of my elders who told me, Four will begin by telling you everything he knows and ends with everything he doesn't. So I'm still a student of life. Despite my titles, I think a lot of us in the academic plantation, we get caught up with our titles, and really we don't know anything, and we have to continue to learn and build for our people on the ground. So really, it's an honor to be on this platform. And Pongi, it reminds me of Fukiao's text. And once again, this is for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody on this platform does, but for any of my people, this is an African form of governance where many of the elders and the people on the ground level are involved. It's a political institution, and it's truly an honor to be in this space. So I know this is a long-winded answer, but I had to, really discuss just my journey briefly, and also that pain, because once again, that's that pain, and those are the trials that molded me.
Indeed. And it's ironic, even though I don't have like memory and like a recent cultural connection to Haiti, I do have history there in the sense that um, my family primarily comes out of Louisiana. And when doing the the ancestry to as far back as we could, there is a male who started and adopted the name King, uh, and in our family, and uh, he came from Haiti, to uh, to Louisiana, and on the record it just says father from Africa. So he was one of those groups that came in the mid to late 1800s, into Haiti, and from there, came into Louisiana. And I wonder if my grandfather on my mother's side, so my on my dad's side, is Opelousas, New Orleans,
Mm.
mainly Opelousas in in Louisiana. But my mom's dad's side is also Louisiana. with her mom primarily being in East Texas. So, but my grandfather, my mom's dad, his name is Baptiste, and he's a very dark, brother, and he has that. And if I could find a digital version, I can show later on a picture of my grandfather, who's still living. He lives in Vegas right now, but he doesn't know of any, like off the top of his head, like any kind of recent um, Haitian ancestry. But for you to be walking around in New Orleans with that name, it's very suspect. Uh, I just gotta know, but I do know for a fact on my dad's mother's side, it is the direct line is from Haiti. Um, but so I'm assuming, because of course you're first generation here, and then of course your parents being from Haiti, that this just want to know more about your heritage, along with many other things, just kind of fueled this interest to Haiti. and and so what is what does Haiti mean to you outside of just immediate ancestry, and why is it important even for us who are African Americans and Africans, abroad, so to speak? Why is Haiti, such an important topic, and a focus of um, in important history for the rest of the world?
That's an excellent question. In a simple word, it's an example of Pan-Africanism. In fact, your story, I could actually see a deep connection because once again, we could put you right there in Benin or the Congo, you will fit right in. Or once again, you look like a lot of my relatives in Ayiti. So the main reason I say it's an example of Pan-Africanism. Of course, you remember the story of Charles Deslandes. It's funny that you mentioned Louisiana. I have to go to my folks in New Orleans. We got some real brothers and sisters back in NOLA. And I have to say, those who are familiar with the German Coast Uprising, Charles Deslandes was also brought over in, of course, the 1800s. And for those who are not familiar with the German Coast Uprising, one of his slave masters came from France and was fleeing, of course, when the Empire Ayiti was established. So Charles Deslandes was a headman on the plantation. And despite being a headman, for those who don't know what a headman is, these were not just the overseer, but, the ones responsible for keeping them field Negroes in check. But nonetheless, much like the film Sankofa by Haile Garima, he engaged in Maroonage and led a resistance movement. Yes, it was stamped out, but once again, you can see a direct correspondence with what occurred in Ayiti. But the other reason why I feel is an example of Pan-Africanism, whether we talk about ancient Kemet or Kemet, whether we talk about Ouagadougou, whether we talk about Mali, you had different groups of African people who came together to build a nation when under a common threat. So I think that example is really another important case in terms of what we talk about in terms of big P Pan-Africanism, not just on the continent, but globally. How do we as African people, despite our small differences, come together to build a nation or to deal with a common foe or oppressor? So just hearing your story, man, it just reminds me of my household once again. I was raised by an African American father, but also once again by my Haitian mother. So once again, I got a taste of both worlds. And despite their little, they used to poke fun of each other. My papa used to make fun of Haitians. My mom used to come at Black Americans, but nonetheless, they was together. And I grew up in this household. And really, you recognize there's no difference between us too much. There might be a language barrier, small cultural differences, but even amongst the cultural differences, she knew how to make black eyed peas. Like she learned how to make certain southern dishes because she could see the correlation from when we eating legume, kalalu, some of our traditional dishes. So for me, growing up in that household was another example of Pan-Africanism, not just in terms of what we read in the text, but actually through experience. In fact, my first time actually going back home was back in 2017 with my teacher, Mambo Dr. Ama Mazama, because she asked me, "You never went back home to IT?" I was like, "Nah, my parents never brought me. My boy mom wanted to bring me, but at the time, my mom was fearful after, of course, Aristide was exiled both times, and they grew up in the era of the Tonton Macoutes under Papa Duvalier. Of course, Baby Duvalier, they always like to say under Papa Doc, at least he kept the country in order, but with Baby Doc, he ran the country like a celebrity, and that's when a lot of things went hectic. So that's when they decided to come. She was actually my mother who raised me was the first to come to the U.S., and then the rest of the family came. So they had a lot of trauma from back home. So and we also had a big family, so we had some tensions. So that's why she didn't really want me to go over there by myself. But my first time taking a class with Mambo Dr. Amma Mazama, she told me, listen, you have to go home. We have a chapter, Afrocentricity International chapter in Ayiti. We're bringing you home. And then that following year in 2018, she brought me to Benin because she told me, listen, you need to understand some of the descent that you come from. You need to know about the Dahomey people. You need to know about the kingdom of Dahomey, the kingdom of Ouida, the kingdom of Alara, in which Toussaint Louverture hails from. So once again, she brought me to the source, particularly in Ouida, which is the source of Voodoo, or what we call ice and voodoo. So I know that was long-winded, but you got me excited, man, because really in one simple word, we talk about Pan-Africanism when we talk about Ayiti.
Indeed. And here's I found a photo. So this is my grandfather Baptiste, and this is his wife. This isn't my biological grandmother, but she grandma just the same. All my life, that's all I've known, him with. And so, but yeah, this is him out of New Orleans, Baptiste. But so I'm still doing some investigation on that side of the family. So I only have a little bit of information, but we'll see. It may come full circle again on both sides of the family. But
so we family,
but
we family then.
Indeed. And so and you mentioned Pan-Africanism, and to at least on a biological level, that is something that really kind of anywhere you go in the diaspora, on a biological level, that's exactly what it is. So you have what I always say is why the diaspora is so powerful wherever they go, is because we have the most ancestors. And we have powerful ancestors from all across the continent, saying who have come and manifested themselves in their descendants. And but before we continue on there, I want to I want you to introduce, and I'm gonna share on the screen your book, your latest text. And let me Chrome tab correctly. There we go. And here is the text. So can you give us, and I'm going to blow it up just a little bit while you're explaining exactly what is this text, what inspired you to write it, and what can we get out of this? Go ahead.
Absolutely. So once again, the title is The African Revolution in Ayiti, Liberté ou la Mort, which means liberty or death, or freedom or death. And this was the major motto of Papa Jean-Jacques Dessalines. That was the motto for the Empire of Ayiti. On the emblem, you actually see the name Liberté ou la Mort. Once again, we must always have the essence of freedom amongst our ancestors and be willing to die for it. And part of the reason why I had to push this text were of course, the current events in Ayiti, especially after the assassination of Jovenel Moise. Back in 2021, I sat on my dissertation for 2 years because once again, I'm my own worst critic, so I knew there was some work I needed to do, but events were moving very fast, especially in Ayiti at that time, especially with the assassination of Jovenel Moise, which was actually very similar to the assassination of Gilliam Sam before the United States occupation in 1915, where you have Roosevelt Bobo, who of course had his qualms with of course Gilliam Sam, but then led the Cauco fighters to go against the Marine occupation, followed by Charlemagne Pelat. Right now, you're seeing I don't like to always say history repeats, but it most definitely rhymes. This is why Baba Clark says history is a clock. So once again, when you look at Jimmy Charizet Barbecue, or Jimmy Barbecue Charizet, the one who they label in charge of the G9 Federation, but now he has a new organization in what seems to be revolution. But his case is very interesting because he was a former police officer. If you understand the history of Charlemagne Pelat, he was an ex-military officer. But once again, I can see sort of those connections. And in fact, before I did the book, I actually took one of my chapters. The chapter in the book is chapter 2, Survey of the Converging Streams of African War and Resistance in the African World. It was actually the 4th chapter of my dissertation. In fact, I wrote that chapter during the pandemic, and I had a lot of rage at that time. But that's probably why I consider it one of my best chapters, because once again, that was a chapter written with a lot of rage and pain. My mother was in the hospital. Black Lives Matter was going on. I was in Philadelphia, so remember the National Guard was in Philly at that time. It reminded me of literally like Spook Who Sat by the Door. So that chapter was written in rage. So in 2021, I began to take that chapter and turn it into an article, which was published in the Journal of Black Studies, originally by the title Convergent Streams of African War and Resistance in the African World. I decided not to use diaspora, which means dispersion, because when you look all over the globe, you have African people of African descent all over the world. And there are various movements occurring at that time, not just here in the United States, but the United States, but also in my country of Ayiti, which in fact, the fighting has intensified. And once again, you have to ask that question: where did those foreign weapons come from? Or of course, when they discussed the drug trade that was going on at the time, as well as once again that involvement in terms of Jovenel Moïse assassination and the core group who installed Henry Ariel, or Minister Ariel, or Ariel, as you guys know him. Once again, he was not elected. We didn't have elections until since 2016. So once again, I like to say that these events are not an accident of history. They're intentional. And in fact, it reminds me back in the 60s with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and, of course, Thomas Sankara. But, I'm not going to rock that boat too much. So when I actually eventually got to really writing the text, I actually took my brother Imo Odo's advice. He told me, listen, man, you might want to, sit on your dissertation, just for a couple of years just to see the events that unfold. And he's absolutely right. And I wish I went with an independent Black publisher. That was my original idea. But I actually got approached by Lexington Books, which is a conglomerate of Rowman and Littlefield. And they happened to stumble upon my article in JBS and asked if this was a part of a larger project. So, of course, at the time, I'm working towards tenure. So, something in my heart said, you know what, let me just take this opportunity. But fortunately, I'm not making no money off this book. For those who don't understand the dimensions of publishing, I highly recommend you go independent or find a Black publisher. Sadly, they have control of my intellectual property. They're going to get much of the revenue. If I can have it in my way, in a perfect world, now that I know the ins and outs of what it takes to publish, I would have went with an independent. I would have went independent, or I would have went with a Black publisher. But of course, I want to at least learn the groundwork and really know the steps in terms of what it takes to go through the peer review process and to create a manuscript, to do the proposal, to do the indexing, and then to publish a book. So it was a lot. It was a lot of money I lost, which is why I'm not. Which is why I actually wanted to share the discount code. Thank you, brother. Please don't go on Amazon. You're gonna end up paying the sticker price. I think they charge it $104. Once again, if it was up to me, I would have kept it cheap. But because it's hardback, this is what they charging. But please use my discount code. You get 30% off. You just have to, once again, make an account with Rowman and Littlefield, and then you can apply that discount code. Don't buy the sticker price, please. Once again, I don't get money from this, so don't spend your hard-earned money to buy the sticker price. The ebook, you would just have to get, I believe it's Adobe Digital Editions. You would just have to download that app, and then you could get the ebook version. Once again, they're very protective of my product, or of course, my intellectual property that they now own. It's like the music industry, but once again, I want to share just really that spark. I think due to the current events, especially once again when I saw the border situation of Aysans who've been living in South America to flee the political turmoil, who are being whipped by border patrol, on horses. So once again, I felt that push, and I had a lot of anger, and something in my heart, maybe it was the ancestors, that told me, listen, you gotta get this worked out. So that's the background information around the book, real briefly.
I appreciate that. And I'll make sure that I show it again, and we'll remind folks to get it. And regardless, y'all just need to have it, because y'all need to have a powerful and important library. So we push having personal libraries here. So get the hardcover, and remember, this is an investment. So don't look at it necessarily as expensive or cheap. It's an investment not only into your library, but into uh, your sense of history and for strategies for preventing. Because I think a lot of times, we have these conversations and we talk about what happened, but we should be studying what happened so that we can see how do we prevent it in the future, and to even almost predict what may happen in the future given certain circumstances. So for example, and this is the question I'm going to ask you, why is everyone trying to get Haiti? What is there in Haiti that these governments and things will go through all this trouble to try to destabilize governments to gain access and occupy that territory? Does your research cover that? Go ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, when you deal with the original name of the island by the Taino Arawak people, Ayiti or Cascade, Land of High Mountains, it's under two tectonic plates. And in fact, there's a lot of resources, not just in Jamaica when you talk about bauxite that makes you aluminum, but also gold and oil. So once again, you had numerous European powers, especially in the case of the Spanish who first landed there, and then later and established Santo Domingo, and then of course later the French who established Saint Domingue. For many of those colonial institutions, once again, they want to not only reap the resources in terms of the materials, but once again also the natural agriculture, particularly the crack cocaine of its time, sugar, which made French is numerous wealth. And as a result, they decided to create a colonial system or plantation in proximity to whiteness. At the top, you had the Grand Blanc, which were the rich whites, Petit Blanc, poor whites. And then they decided to create a buffer class in proximity to whiteness. Jean du Couleur, or of course, the derogatory term mulatto. Now, when it came to indigenous people, it was mestizo. But for those who aren't familiar with those terms, mulatto was somebody who had an enslaved African mother and, of course, French father, many of them who were born free. And in fact, you had some who didn't want to be recognized or labeled as black, or those enslaved African people at the bottom. But you also had African people who existed prior to Columbus, particularly if you know Abu Bakr, some of his travels and interactions, as well as, of course, African people who freed themselves, much like many of the Tainos, such as Enriquillo or Anacoana, who freed themselves to establish their own societies, or what some people call maroon communities. But, once again, you want to be critical of some of those European concepts and terms. If you do deal with the French adjective, it means someone who's feral, or chimaroon, someone who's a runaway. So once again, we want to be critical. What did they actually call their settlements or their territories, such as in, of course, Brazil, about the capital, Colombo dos Palmares. So, I try to uncover the names of those particular communities. And of course, we know some of those early leaders who would light the initial spark for our revolution, such as Padre Jean, Macandal, Cecile Fatima, who's also a Mambo, had a spy network throughout the island to organize the Bois Cayman ceremony, where she appointed many of the initial leaders, such as Jeanette Boulit, Boukman, Jean-Francois Papillon, and George Bousseau. So, for me, that context is very critical in terms of why is Ayiti always a target? In fact, I just read a recent text that was also released in 2023 by Leslie Alexander, who's the sister of Michelle Alexander, but she has a dope book called Fear of the Black Republic. And of course, you also have to deal with the strategic location of Ayiti, who's a direct threat for the United States, especially when Dessalines established the Empire of Ayiti. Yes, you had the red and blue, which was, of course, our independence flag and a flag for the indigenous army. But really, the first flag of our nation was black and red. Hence, of course, the color of my book. Black to represent the black people, red for the sacrifices done by our fighters and their ancestors. And of course, this will inspire Marcus Mazar Garvey when he's creating the Pan-African flag, the red, black, and green. In fact, if you look at Marcus Mazar Garvey, this great ancestor, he would fashion himself in military garb, much like Papa Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And that's another reason we call him Papa Dessalines, because after he was assassinated, he would be deified. He would be incorporated into the family of Ogul as a Loa, which is why he's very venerated in my family's hometown of Lata Bonite, because once again, he would be immortalized, almost like the story of course, who you're named after, Asar and his resurrection. So once again, I find those correlations are very important to make. You're muted, brother.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for. Let me share my screen. Um, because people really don't understand like the relationship between African Americans and Haiti, even to the point where um, we share the same. Like you mentioned the original colors of the uh, the I guess the flag of Haiti was red and black, and this is the flag. It says the recreation of Melvin Charles' original 1967 creation with some additional adjustments by Mike Trey in terms of the African American flag. But there's another one that's done for Juneteenth, and I'm trying to figure out where. How would I
I think I
name
know
it?
what you're talking about. You're talking about the original Juneteenth flag, right?
I believe so because it still has the colors that Haiti has as well. So, um, which I don't see. Let me see. We put Juneteenth. Right. Here we go.
Yes, yes.
So you can see. I guess I could just pick any one of these. Um, let me see. Open. Right. So this is our Juneteenth flag, and so of course now I gotta go to Haiti flag, and uh, you can see a bit of inspiration for that, and so this is just a little bit of history. um, Let me go back here. So you know each iteration, this is the African American flag, and then but our Juneteenth flag, um, and then of course the Haiti flag in its colors,
Mm-hmm.
and we can see that that almost semiotic relationship because many of the when the Haiti Revolution happened, that sparked some some revolutions here, and so it really kind of speaks to the network because again, a lot of those people after the Haitian Revolution, some years later, ended up moving into Louisiana, and when these people started spreading and going and passing the word around about the revolution and what happened, it sent some shock waves here in the United States, and wondering if you have any knowledge on that history, and if so, if you can kind of articulate.
Absolutely. And I kind of wish I included that portion in my book, particularly when I was talking about the convergent streams of African war and resistance, because I didn't include Charles Deslandes and the German Coast Uprising in New Orleans. That case is a direct correlation to what occurred in Ayiti. But I did, of course, discuss Nat Turner. I did discuss many other prominent figures who had large resistance movements here in the United States and were inspired by the revolution in Ayiti. Or even, of course, the Battle of Adwa in Ethiopia. This, of course, inspired Sarah Lionel Robert James, also known as C.L.R. James, to first originally do the play on Black Jacobins, except he was going to have Paul Robeson play Toussaint Louverture, despite that critiques, because once again, that was like sort of the French narrative to diminish the role of African people in their victory, particularly, to call them Black Jacobins, the Jacobins who, of course, led the French Revolution. So, of course, it reminds me of what Baba Jedi Jemsu Jahuti wrote, also known as Jacob Carruthers, in Intellectual Warfare, that first chapter in Battle of Kemet, when he's discussing their role in terms of trying to diminish the agency of African people who won that battle in Ayiti. So I'm absolutely with you. I've learned about that information much later, And furthermore, during our last conference in October at Sheikh Etajope, of course, one of the Dr. Set, he was in charge of a particular, I can't remember the name of the plantation. It's skipping my mind now. But of course, he was on the plantation in which the German Coast Uprising was held. So he shared a little more information on that. And, a part of me kind of wish I waited a little longer before I pushed the book out. But I think I could do a revision because I definitely want to add that story because it's an important contribution to our story, as Bayina Bello would state. So thank you for asking that question, brother. I'm with you.
Indeed. And for those of you who are a part of my Patreon page, that conversation in which our guest just spoke of by Dr. Ibrahim Sek, I have most of that conversation from the Sheikh Anta Diop conference already uploaded if you have not seen it. And so in the back, it's about 17, 18 minutes. And it's titled Ibrahima Sek, Sheikh Anta Diop Conference 2023. And he talks about, the title of his talk was A Journey Through Slavery at Whitney Plantation Museum of Slavery in Louisiana. So he goes into details of that uprising, its connection to Haiti and the like, and more so linking it even to Senegal, where he's from, and the names that were still attached, the naming practices and things that were still attached to some of the enslaved Africans who were involved in that uprising. So for those of you on Patreon, remember that video is up, and y'all can view that particular lecture. And so given what you've learned, again, it's one thing to study history, but it's also another thing to, as a result of that knowledge of history, to be able to implement and to design strategies for repairing those injuries as a result of that history, if it is in fact traumatic, and then preventing it from happening again. And what have you learned in terms of initial conditions that and I do apologize for these kids in the back, but what is the particular strategies that have come to mind on how to not let this stuff happen again? What aren't we getting as a result of not knowing or not paying attention to this particular history?
One of the most critical things is our system of governance. And once again, the issues that we're seeing today is a direct result of the assassination of Papa Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and of course, the systems that were to model European societies that were put in place. For instance, I love the title of your platform, Mbongi, because that's very important. But also, when you look at the sort of governance system established in the Empire of Ayiti, and it's funny that Jimmy Charize mentioned this in his interview. He mentioned that they need to have a council of elders so that we could really begin to repair the nation and really govern it on this stance and on the grounds of the African people themselves in Ayiti. And this was sort of the notion of Dessalines when he established the Empire of Ayiti. He said that him and his wife would be the only nobles. There will be no nobility. But he will also have a council of elders who, along with him and his wife, would appoint the next emperor. It wasn't going to be hereditary. So imagine if that system was allowed to, of course, persist. And of course, mind you, he split the population between those who were going to work the land. This is why he stated that every citizen would have land, as well as those who were going to be soldiers, to prepare for future invasions. But sadly, due to traitors, not just from the Jendu Kala, but also some of his, the elite black generals, due to traitors who want to, of course, utilize and model themselves after Europeans, that didn't come to fruition. So imagine if Dessalines was not assassinated. Imagine if he was able to really solidify the power of the empire. So, of course, I love this quote from Nas. No idea is original. There's nothing new under the sun. But I believe there's very important lessons we have to learn, not just from the elders, but also from the youth. When you look at every resistance movement, every revolution is mostly led by young people. So once again, we have to have a system or mpangi or a system of governance where all hands are on deck. And sadly, we have leaders who continue to be the puppets of our oppressors, who continue to sell out, who don't listen to the voices of the people on the ground. We don't have mpangi institutions in many of our nations. And this is a huge critical issue. This is why I wanted to start off by citing Fukuyama's book on mpangi. Because once again, this is what's really missing, not just on the continent, but also in other places where we don't hear the voices of people from the community, when people in the community don't have a role in terms of governance. And sadly, I'm beginning to realize that not even guns and violence is going to solve these issues. Because once again, you have to ask the question, where are these young people? Where are these quote unquote young gangs, as they label them? Where are they getting these AK-47s or these weapons? And there's a clear answer. You have to look towards the United States, where we are right now. But sadly, those weapons aren't going to solve the problems. In fact, if you want to look at the solutions, look at the black women as well as the young people who helped build that canal. When, of course, the DR didn't want to share that canal. Look at what they were able to accomplish so that they now have clean water. I think that gives you a clear case in terms of how we have to move forward and really begin to build our own institutions. But sadly, we're at a period where we're beginning to see what this might be the title of my next book, the dawn of revolutions all over the world, especially amongst African people. When you look at Sudan, when you look at the Congo, yes, you have to look at what's going on in Gaza, but specifically when you look at African countries, even Ayiti, there's a lot going on and the youth are tired. So once again, I have to share the ancestor El Haj Malik Shabazz or Omowale Malcolm X. But when he says chickens coming home to roost, we're beginning to see that right now. And sadly, this election year is going to be very interesting. And I need to hurry up and get out of here because things are about to get critical. Because it's about to be very ugly. And sadly, I don't think we're prepared.
Indeed. And it seems like, and in many respects, there's going to have to be a concerted effort, in essence, to bring Afrocentricity to the ground. Because, of course, you can't have these mbongis without a healthy respect and knowledge of history and what that is and what that means. And for the people on the ground to value themselves as African people, to look to Africa, for solutions, right? And so as, Malana Karenga would always say that too many of us look to Africa as a reference, and not as a resource, right? So, like there's institutions, there's algorithms, so to speak, that can be adopted, that has historically worked for us, that can work for us now, to put us in a position of power to meet the needs of the people. But it seems like, I guess I can ask you this if you're comfortable answering it. What is the role that these adopting these foreign cultures and religions have played in the people not realizing their ultimate goals in freedom? Like how much would it be different if they would adopt their African cultures and their African frame of mind to realizing freedom for which they claim to be fighting for?
I'll spell it to you this way, and I have to pull from this ancestor, Sheikh Anta Diop, when he writes the cultural unity of Black Africa, domains of patriarchy and matriarchy. I don't always like using those terms. I prefer matrilineal or patrilineal. But of course, imagine if we were able to adopt the systems of our ancestors, those matrilineal lines with the Kadakis in ancient Kush. Or of course, if we go to ancient Kemet, if you understand the original Holy Trinity of Osar, Set, Heru, and Set, when she's, of course, ruling the throne and ruling the nation, when Osar spreading civilization throughout the continent. Imagine if we could go to the systems of the Ashanti people, the Ashanti Empire, where, of course, you had the Queen Mother, who wasn't necessarily the wife. It was usually the mother or the sister, much like the Kadakis. But imagine if we had the Queen Mother who could take off her sandals and say, listen, you're not doing your job. You at the throne, I'm going to put the next person in charge so we could do the work for our people. Imagine if we had Ya Asante was. Imagine if our women were more involved in our roles of governance. I think we would be seeing some different things here. That's a short answer, but I think that's a very important question we have to ask. Are we really drawing upon Sankofa? When we talk about Sankofa, it's not just going back to the past, but going back to the past to build and grab the best aspects of our ancestral past to build towards our current foundations. Well, as people like to say, to build a better future. But I know, of course, if you look at Sasa Zamani, you have to be very critical of that notion of future. But of course, I get where we're trying to go. So I think it's very important to have that conversation. What are the best aspects that we truly are drawing from our ancestral past to really build a new foundation? And sadly, you're gonna have to tear down the old foundations. This is why in Ayiti we say "kupetet bulakai." You have to cut off the head and burn down the house. When we talk about revolution, yeah, it gets ugly. And sometimes you have to burn down all those old foundations if we need to build something new. You can't continue to maintain these old dominant structures. And sadly, you have many of us who are comfortable in European societies. That's the sad reality. When you look at all this social media, all this good poison we like to consume, a lot of people have a hard time giving that up. And you're going to have to make some hard choices. We're going to have to be very honest with ourselves. And we're going to have to give up some things that are really to our best detriment. It's funny. I was talking to my students, even when we talk about music. And I know, brother, you older than me, so of course you have a long history of our music, particularly once again the 5 pillars or even the Afrocentric scene. Yes, that term Afrocentric didn't necessarily start in the academy; it started on the ground levels. When of course, you had Poor Righteous Teacher, Tribe Called Quest, Brand Nubian, Queen Latifah. Once again, when you listen to that music, it was it was a very different message, and we were very much in tune with our African culture to a degree. Before, of course, you get the proliferation of gangster rap. I love when Wise Intelligence in that 06 conference, the Black Muslim and Hip Hop Conference, when he talked about the commission report, how that was not an accident. I was very much intentional where hip hop went from positive to negative. So I think we have to have a long chronology. There's a reason why they're promoting artists with no talent. And, I'm not calling out the sister, but when you look at the Sexy Reds, when you look at the 6ix9ines, when you listen to like the dilution of our music, there's no soul in it no more. It's really programming. And we have to be very careful what we consume because our youth are in trouble. I was on Baba Shamari's show during Black History Month, and I had to talk about his text. Why children hate us. Black parents betray Black children. And sadly, oftentimes we just want our children to survive, but are we really preparing them and really instilling our ancestral African culture values? And I really respect those of you who are parents such as yourself, Asar, because once again, I know that you're instilling your children with our culture and our history, but not enough of us are doing this. And I can't speak because I'm not a parent myself yet, but once again, I have those fears. Do I really want to raise my children in a nation like this? And even when we go to our own African countries, don't believe that they don't have their issues either. There are many of them who are still adopting European models. There's a reason why this traitor of a president in Kenya is trying to send a police force. And of course, that's a result of the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army that was stamped out. And of course, the important ancestor, Didan Kamati. So, I know that was long-winded, but I think there are pivotal examples that we're not drawing upon. And many of us are not serious yet. That's just the reality. A lot of us are comfortable. Even myself, I have to look at myself. There are certain times where I have to, I'm beginning to really develop a 5-year plan because I realize I haven't really done that work yet. There are times where I haven't really truly connected with our people on the ground. A lot of us with our academic titles of doctor, we get comfortable in our Eiffel Towers. I still remember the charge by Dr. Amma Muzama. A lot of you are at the National Council of Black Studies. Yes, that's excellent work. But what about our people on the ground? Not just here, but also in other places of the globe. Where are organizations to lead us towards action? Are we just going to be armchair scholars, or are we going to be scholar activists, much like our ancestors such as Chancellor Williams and many others? So, I had to really look internally, and I had to be critical of myself. I realized I haven't really done the work yet, and I have a lot more work to do. So I really appreciate having elders such as yourself who have your own independent Black platforms to really push us towards another positive direction. That's my goal, to establish my own institution that could really liberate our people. Because sadly, we don't have enough organizations or institutions we're building.
Indeed. And it's I want to kind of go back to something that you were talking about in the beginning of that segment, in terms of having powerful women in places of governments and decision making and the like. And it reminded me of in the context of re-Africanizing our people. And I always said I don't have a daughter. My youngest brother has 2 daughters, I believe, because one's coming. And and uh, I like to study, for example, the collagen people in East Africa, primarily in Kenya, and and of course, me dealing with African languages, naming practices, and why and how African people name their children. So part of this comes in the naming aspect of this being a very minor but major revolutionary act is how and what you name your children. And so I'm like, there's this one name that I remember. It's from the collagen people. It's a woman's name, and because it has the prefix ta, right, which is the feminine morpheme. So it's ta bilga, and it means one who sets fire to the enemy's huts. And I'm like, if even if that is not like a personal name, that needs to be an office title, like that's just held by certain women. She is the top bill guy, the one who sets fire to enemies' huts, right? Like when you, and I say that to say in relationship to, in many respects, a name is a goal or an objective for the person to grow into and achieve, right? And so it's in many respects a person's name.
Brother, so I think your screen froze.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
I'm
now.
sorry.
It's
Wait a minute. Yeah, my bad.
frozen. That's all.
The
You back. You back.
Yeah, it went out. But what I was saying, that your name is kind of your north star, that kind of guides you, into your purpose or whatnot. And so when you had mentioned that, I thought about that in the context of one, African naming practices, and and how they viewed, women. So like even when you go back to ancient Kemet, like when you have certain powerful warrior deities, for example, like Sekhmet,
Like, man,
right? Or if you're in the Yoruba tradition, like Oya,
yes,
right? Having that representation in terms, because remember, these are models to be emulated in terms of their characters in which the models represent, in human beings. And so, I guess now it's getting into the realm of pedagogy,
yes, let's go.
and how, what are some great strategies to teach and to reinforce these attitudes and these concepts amongst, the younger people, so that they can see themselves in the teaching, because I know that's a major issue for our youth in these schools. They just don't see themselves in the curriculum, and so they don't see how it applies to them. And I know you're kind of, relatively new into the academic space, but from your experience dealing with um, our youth today who are coming into these spaces, what would have been some challenges that you face teaching them, and that they come into the classroom with, in regards to the knowledge of self and history, and their relationship to it.
That's an excellent question. In fact, after I finished my master's, I worked with a group called Liberty Partnership Rising Star Programs. You had a lot of youth starting high school, some of them coming from group homes who were able to get paid. And of course, I remember one of our themes was to learn your roots. But also, even when I was in Philadelphia, you had the Building Information Technology Skills, known as BITS, which is a very similar program. But one of my approaches with the youth was sometimes I have to meet them where they at. And then, of course, I could share experiences. Because I remember we were showing them some of the digital devices we had in our past. And it was like, yo, what's that? Like Mr. Singhile at that time, but Mr. Singhile, what is that? Like, what device is that? Y'all Stone Ages, but then we could, share some of our stories when we were in their place. So sometimes it's meeting them where they at, because that's actually connects with my chapter 4, the maintenance of African cosmology and identity. Because you said something very key. You mentioned language and even naming. And once again, always like to have a discussion about where they get their names from, because once again, that's an initial discussion. Because even many of us who receive European names, for instance, I have a French name. My name, my original name, Wilbert Saint-Hilaire, it comes from my mother's middle name. Her name was Mary Willid Saint-Hilaire. And yes, you have a lot of Haitians who have the name Mary, much like our empress. So, there's a deep connection there as well. But of course, she named me Wilbert. In Hebrew, it means one who desires brilliance and leadership, or of course, Germanic for bright hope. But I understood that my mother wanted me to be a great man. So during my Dina naming ceremony, amongst some of my chapter brothers and sisters in Afrocentricity International, I was bestowed the name Kimoni, which in Yoruba means great man, or a great king, or a man with great wealth. Because once again, I understood my mom understood my destiny when she named me. And once again, many of us might be named after an uncle or an ancestor. In fact, when I was in Ghana, I also received the name Yao Adu. Yao, for those who understand the Akan naming traditions, depending on when you're born, it's associated with a particular deity or a day of a week. So Yao, for those of you who are Thursday born, there's a particular deity associated with Yao. And of course, Ajani, also Yoruba, he who wins the struggle. So once again, when you look at African naming traditions, many of us who receive Black American names or even French names, many of us still follow that construction of African naming traditions. So I always like to have that as an early lesson with a lot of my youth. Where'd you get your name? Who your family? Who you named after? And that really opens up a conversation for them to really understand our deeper African naming traditions. Because oftentimes, once again, you got to spoon feed sometimes. I know a lot of us, we just want to come like a bulldozer, but that's not the right approach for youth. Sometimes we have to meet them where they're at based on their interests. For instance, I like the scenario Baba Kabe Kamene does. Akira Toriyama just passed away, but he uses like the metaphor of Dragon Ball Z, or rather the new version, Dragon Ball Super. And I guess one of the gods of destruction, when you look at him, he literally looks like Anubis. So it was quite interesting. He draws parallels from that, especially with a lot of anime. Anime really draws upon Japanese mythology. So those of you who are content creators, we need our own African animation that really draws upon African cosmology. Because once again, that's a good introduction for youth to really understand our systems or our systems of governance. So when we talk about, for example, I like doing this example with them, especially anybody who comes from a Latino community. For instance, we have a celebration for our ancestors, Fet Gede, November 1st and 2nd. So, of course, I like to highlight that film Coco, where the Mexicans have their Day of the Dead. And, usually that always sparks conversations because, I ask, how many of you saw this film? And I'm very critical of Hollywood. You want to be careful of certain mediums. But, of course, there could be some examples you could pull from that could get some of the youth's attention, especially when it comes to music, entertainment. Sadly, you have to use some edutainment, just to grab them. Like I said, you have to have the medicine and the candy. So that's always been my approach in terms of utilizing popular culture, so then we can have a deeper conversation and actually see, all right, where are they drawing a lot of this material? Even like when we were originally talking about the Holy Trinity, or certain names such as Amenhotep III, and then Amen. Sometimes you have to meet them based on their own reality to bring them back home, in a lack of better words. So once again, we have to be very strategic in terms of developing our Ubuntu pedagogy, in terms of how are we really connecting with our youth. Sadly, we're still using the old church models instead of more of an active learning approach. Similar to, I got to cite Fukuyama again when he talks about Kandenzi. Our original forms of African babysitting are really preparing youth to fulfill roles in society. It's a short read for anybody interested, but when I read that book, it really opened up my eyes. And in fact, in that book, it mentioned how many women had more freedom to work because once again, you had those Kandenzis or Ndenzis who were able to watch the youth and really guide them and really do role playing so they can be prepared for roles that they're going to play in society. So that's what we got to get back to. We got to be really intentional in terms of what are going to be our educational pedagogy and approaches in terms of, how should I say, inserting, or of course, I'm trying to use the right, injecting different aspects of our culture into our youth. Like I said, sometimes you got to hide the medicine in the candy.
Indeed. And, one way in which I approach this is in a similar way that Sheikh Anta Diop did in his tenure. And although, he mainly wrote for the people in the ivory tower because he was having debates. He was trying to gets him. So we understand why he was, but of course he was also active locally and politically, for which he was jailed uh, a couple of times, you
Yes,
know,
sir.
for his activism. But one of the things that he always tried to do was to help people on the ground see the relationship, for example, between ancient Egyptian and West and Central Africa, and showing how all of y'all belong to the same ancestral family and culture. And this is how we scientifically demonstrate this particular fact. We can do this in a number of ways, either through genetics, archaeology, and of course linguistics. And so, there is a linguist out of the Central Republic of Africa,
Wow.
um, of Sango descent and Zande descent, and by the name of Jean Claude Mboli. And he recently, this is just a preview from his presentation that he did at a conference
Mm.
in, and I'm gonna blow it up for the people so that they can see that a conference that was held in Ghana, actually. And so what he was demonstrating here is the relationship between naming the naming of the days of the week amongst the Akan in association actually with African deities. And
Mm.
so what he is arguing now, I haven't seen because this is being it's been peer reviewed and supposed to be published in a French linguistics journal, or French speaking linguistics journal, sometime. Hopefully, I think it comes out this summer. And but he did a presentation, and it was this is part of his presentation. And so with Kwesi uh, being associated with Isis in the name Isis, uh, the third day, Piri,
Yep.
being in association with Nepri, which is an ancient Egyptian deity,
Mm-hmm.
Kuku, and He, and
Yeah.
Yao
Mm-hmm.
being associated with Ra. So if everything pans out, and again, I haven't reviewed. I've seen some of his arguments, and they seem to be sound. Um, and then of course in Yame with Amen, uh, and I was born on Monday, Quincy, so I would technically be named after Isis or Aset,
That's it.
Amasat. And but what's ironic is I just finished um, a chapter for um, a brother who I've met digitally, if I can say that. I've met digitally, um, reg- on my asarimhotep account on Facebook. But I only got to meet him. Well, I finally got to meet him in 2023 at the Sheikh Anta Diop conference. And so after the conference, he sent me an invite to contribute to a text he's editing, and it's going to be a peer reviewed text called Africology, Afrocentricity, and the Transdisciplinary Legacy of Diopian Epistemology.
Oh,
And
Okafor. Yes, yes. I wrote a chapter for that
yeah,
too, brother. We in
oh,
there.
okay, we in there, right? So the chapter in which I'm dealing with has to deal with the etymology of Osiris. And Osiris and Aset, actually they both derive from the same root. They're basically the masculine and feminine of the same concept, right?
Complementarity. That's
And
it.
so it's just interesting coming full circle in terms of me adopting the name Asar. Imhotep was my line name when I pledged Alpha in undergrad. But
Mm.
so how this comes full circle in this sense. And so I'm looking at your name, um, and it would appear that your name has Ra in it.
Yes.
And
I didn't make that
but this is
connection.
just one of, I'm sorry.
I didn't make that connection before, so that's why I'm looking at the research and his chart. It's actually blowing me away, man. Because, man, this is deep. Because even amongst the Loas, my father would be the Mala, who's paired with Aida Wero, and my mother is a Zili Freda. So like I'm starting to see once again that direct correlation between all our African cosmological systems and just this is deeper than what I imagined.
Yeah, but this is the kind of stuff that a lot of people don't get, and unfortunately, not too many of us are actually involved in historical comparative linguistics to make those kinds of connections,
Mm.
right? And so it'll be interesting to see, even though we have adopted French, English, Spanish or Portuguese as these, or I should say, these languages were forced on us. We didn't adopt them, but that's another conversation. Um, but how it's a concept that we call a semantics,
Yes, sir.
right? Like it's the mapping process, the correlation between meaning and the words that we use. So even though we may not have the same words that we used to, we still understand the underlying meanings, and we'll use those words in the way that we used our words in our original language, right?
Mm.
So, um, like, I don't know to what extent this exists in Haitian Creole, but even amongst African Americans, like if we want to say we defeated you, right, or we beat you, we'll say that we we've eaten you, we ate,
Pardon.
right? Like even when we want to talk about, how, like if we was on a track and field, or so and so got ate up on the track, right? Or you hear the sisters, when they're reading, as we would say, somebody, she ate and she didn't leave no crumbs, right? Like it's this association between eating and winning, right? Which you can find all across Africa. Like in Chilua, you say kuja. So you can kuja to eat ja, um, food, but it can also mean to enjoy. So if I want to say I enjoyed my youth, kuja mwana, because mwana, word for child, young, right? But it's not I
Mm.
ate the child. I enjoyed my youth, and but it's a simple thing of like food and things. But I'm going on a tangent now.
No,
But
no, I'm enjoying it because it reminds me of the research. You know his brother well, my brother Dr. Taloa Doro, because his
mm,
dissertation he looked at the connection between his language and Jamaican. He doesn't use
yeah,
patois, but also Haitian or Haitian
yeah,
Creole. It's the same thing. Even Ebonics, or what we call African American vernacular. That construction without the zero copula is like what's understood don't need to be fully said. Like I'm going to
yeah,
school, we about to eat. You know how they talk in Philly, you know what I mean? Like you from New York,
yeah,
like so. I
yeah,
think it's powerful when you make those connections, man, because I think it really shows that despite some of our language barriers, we still talk the same as Black people. Like
yeah,
even when you mentioned certain gestures our women might make without saying a word,
yeah.
you know what you're talking about. But that's definitely the same in the Iceland household. Like especially if you suck
Mhm.
your teeth, woo, that's gonna
That
mean
that's that's a straight West African that has traveled, across the seas, the sucking of the teeth, and
something.
you know, and you just know what that means.
Oh yeah.
But before we go, and again, I do appreciate the you taking the time out uh, to speak with the Mbongi audience and let them know a little bit about your history and your research. And so I just want to send or display, if I can find it here, where they can reach you. And so if you want to connect with them on Facebook, this is his Facebook address. And if you want to connect with him on Instagram, this is his Addy on Instagram. And so, again, I'll display the Facebook and the Instagram. If you want to reach out to our guests and ask any questions or whatnot, and if you want to get his book at the discounted rate, you want to enter the discount code here that is on the screen, and it's, you got to go to ROWMAN.com and search for the title, The African Revolution in Ayiti, and it will come up. And when you make the purchase, you just put in this discount code, and you will get it at would you say 20-30% off?
You're 30% off. Don't buy that
So
sticker price.
yeah, indeed. And so, but before we go, what do you have coming up? Or what are some plans that you have in terms of, um, it could be academic, it could be institution building, or just an event or something coming up. So what do you have uh, coming up?
So for personally, I just completed the chapter. I just submitted along with you and Dr. Victor Okafor's upcoming text. I think
Hmm.
it's gonna shake up some things. We got a lot of strong scholars, including yourself. I believe Dr. Mazama, Brother Dr. Taro Ododo. So there's gonna be some sharp scholars on there. So I'm excited to see that coming out. Right now, I have to focus a little on the students. So I am doing like a short little tour run to promote the book. Also, I'm thinking of working on a new project to really talk about some of our current events. And then, of course, Afrocentricity, they're going to, of course, Guinea for their conference. So that's going to be dope. For those who want to learn more about Afrocentricity International, I could drop the link a little later, or sorry, he's familiar with the webpage. And
Hmm.
once again, I'm also working on something in terms of Afghan institution building. For instance, I've got to mention the emblem of the empire Ayiti, where in the middle of the emblem is a rooster, and there's a direct correlation between the rooster and, of course, Ogu, which is he's associated with
Hmm.
several animals, but one of them being the rooster. Also, just to connect back to Amun Ra, the rising sun, the rooster calls upon the dawn, but also protects the flock. So once again, there's a deep connection with our African cosmological systems and our way of building nations. So I want to sort of elaborate on that in a short article, but then later into a
Hmm.
larger project. I'm thinking a working title might be The Dawn of the African Revolution, just a play off Frantz Fanon and his book on African Revolution. But that's some of the projects I'm working on right now. But right now, students on spring break, so I'm taking necessary self care. Hopefully, I can spend time with my lady because to build a family. So hopefully that's on the way because my family's pressing me right now.
Yeah, believe me, I understand. If people don't understand, like you gotta, even though every day you working, for yourself and your family and your people, in order to do it, you have to be able to step back and just recoup for a bit before, putting your gear back on and going out back to battle. And so again, I do appreciate you coming on the program and sharing your wisdom, and hopefully this will not be the last time.
Absolutely.
So when you got something new going on, or if we just got a panel or something, I just want to get uh, a slew of perspectives or whatnot. Hopefully you can join the panel, and we can get delve deeper into more specific uh, topics. But again, make sure that you all go out and purchase the text, The African Revolution in Haiti, uh, Liberté ou Le Mort, Freedom or Death by Dr. Kimoni, Ya, or Ra, I should say, Ajani. And and of course, make sure that you tune in on March the 17th and on Brother Garfield Reed's channel, as well as this channel, the Mbongi, as I engage in a debate on is Sumerian a Bantu language.
So
And some people will, 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And there are people who will ask, why is this important? Because, this is just about history itself and where African people have expanded. Because if you uh, leave it to certain individuals, they'll believe that, of course, they had to give up that Africans left and populated the rest of the earth. But for some reason, after that initial migration, they believed that African people's feet stopped working and that we were just unable to walk and travel. And we just stayed in some little forest area somewhere in Central Africa. And we didn't make inroads in other spaces. And so this is what this conversation uh, will demonstrate, is that African people have always been on the move, and our influence is felt everywhere we go, whether forced or not. And and so this is a larger conversation on the how powerful and impactful African people, more so specifically African culture and especially African languages, have on the globe without, you know, having to force it on anyone. So, hip hop culture, Yoruba religion, ancient Egyptian religion and culture, Zulu culture and religion, all spread without, having to kill anybody. We just be, and everybody wants to follow. And so the discourse is greater than simply a linguistic one. And I hope that y'all are able to tune in. And again, make sure that you like the video. And again, thanks to our guest. And until next time, peace and blessings to each and every one of you.
Yeah, so
And
before
we're
the
out.
Tokyo wanna dose that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and call Uno. Came to kick the door with a game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack flight. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.